Dad, how do you like the lake house I gave you 2 years ago? My daughter Sarah asked casually as she carved the turkey I had prepared so carefully for Thanksgiving. I almost choked on the piece of mashed potato I was chewing. What house? I managed to whisper, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. Sarah, I never got any house. The smile on her face faltered for a split second, but then returned, accompanied by a nervous laugh. Oh Dad, don't be modest. The property on Lake Morrison, remember? I mailed you all the paperwork on your 65th birthday. My name is Charles, I'm 67 years old, and I've been working as a building superintendent for over 15 years. After my wife died of cancer 3 years ago, life became a daily struggle to pay the outstanding medical bills and keep a roof over my head. Sarah built a tech empire from scratch. At 32, she runs a $1 million app development company. She was always my bright, determined daughter, the child who promised she would take care of Daddy when she grew up. But in recent years, our contact has been limited to quick phone calls about business meetings and international travel. Sarah, I said, placing my fork carefully on the table, I live in the same apartment I've always lived in. That small studio in the city center. I've never received any documents for any other home. Her husband, Marcus, a corporate lawyer who had always treated me with polite indifference, raised an eyebrow. That's strange, Charles. Sarah has mentioned several times that you were loving the quiet of the lake. I felt my heart race as a cold sensation spread through my chest. For the past 2 years, I had assumed Sarah was too busy with her growing company to worry about her retired father. I understood. Success requires sacrifice. But now, looking at her confused face, a terrible possibility began to form in my mind. Sarah, I said slowly, can you show me the papers? The transfer documents. She exchanged a quick glance with Marcus, who suddenly seemed very interested in his smartphone. Sure, Dad. They're all in my office at home. I can pick them up tomorrow if you want to review them. But there was something in the way she said it, an almost imperceptible hesitation, that made my stomach sink. For years, I had prided myself on my daughter's independence, even when it meant we went months without seeing each other. I had rationalized her absence as the natural price of success. Now, as I watched her avoid my direct gaze, a devastating question echoed in my mind. Did Sarah really think she was taking care of me, or was there something much more sinister going on? The Thanksgiving dinner I had prepared with such love, even though I had to skimp on every ingredient, suddenly tasted like ashes. If you're wondering how this story ends, just like I was at that moment, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out the whole truth. Because what I discovered after that innocent conversation would change everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. And when the truth finally came out, none of us would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. as usual, even though it was a holiday. My body didn't know the difference between weekdays and holidays after decades of working cleaning shifts. But this time, instead of getting ready for work, I sat down in my worn-out armchair with a cup of cheap coffee and thought about yesterday's conversation. Sarah had always been a bright child, but also calculating. At 8 years old, she already knew exactly what to say to get what she wanted. Daddy, if you buy me that book, I promise I'll be the best student in the school. And she delivered. She always delivered. When she graduated with a degree in computer science at 22, I was in the front row at the ceremony, wearing my only good suit. She hugged me and whispered, "Now I'll take care of you forever, Dad." But in recent years, especially after the death of my wife Linda, Sarah seemed like a polite stranger who called once a month to check if I was still alive. "How are things at work, Dad?" she would ask, but I always felt like she was multitasking, answering emails while talking to me. I rationalized her distance. Success requires sacrifice. A multi-million-dollar company doesn't run itself. And I was proud of her independence, even when it meant I spent holidays alone, heating up a frozen meal while watching reruns on television. But now, looking back on our conversation, disturbing details began to emerge. When I mentioned that I needed to save money on groceries to buy dinner ingredients, Sarah didn't seem surprised. In fact, she didn't even ask why I was struggling financially. And Marcus. That look he exchanged with Sarah when I asked about the documents. It wasn't confusion. It was complicity. At 9 in the morning, I called the bank where I've had an account for 15 years. "Good morning, Mr. Charles," said Janet, the manager who knew my financial situation better than I would have liked. "How can I help you today?" "Janet, I wanted to check if there have been any transfers to my account in the last 2 years. Any deposits I may have forgotten." There was a pause. "Let me check." "No, sir. The only source of regular deposits is your salary from CityClean. No external transfers in the last 2 years." My stomach sank. "Are you sure?" "No deposits from Sarah Harrison or any company related to her." "Absolutely sure, Mr. Charles. I would have processed any transfer of that amount myself. Your daughter has never sent money to this account." I hung up the phone with trembling hands. If Sarah had really sent money to help me with expenses, where had it gone? I spent the rest of the morning rummaging through my papers, looking for any correspondence I might have overlooked. Hospital bills for Linda's illness, collection notices, bank statements showing the same depressing pattern, minimal deposits, desperate withdrawals to cover medication and basic necessities. Nothing. Absolutely nothing from Sarah. At lunchtime, I took the bus to the public library. The librarian, Mrs. Morrison, knew me well. "I came here on weekends to use the computer and save on my internet bill. I need to look up some things about property transfers," I told her. In 40 minutes on the computer, I learned that every property transfer in the state leaves a public trail. If Sarah had really transferred a house to my name, I would find records. I searched for my name in every property database in the county. Nothing. I searched for variations of my name, my social security number, my current address. Nothing. Not only had I never received a house, there had never been an attempt to transfer a house to me. Reality hit me like a punch in the stomach. My daughter had lied to me blatantly about something as significant as a house. But why? On the bus ride home, my phone rang. "Sarah. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling today? I know yesterday was intense with all that talk about the house." Her voice sounded slightly strained, like when she was a child and trying to hide something she had broken. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I went to the bank today. They confirmed that I never received any transfers from you." Silence. "Dad, maybe there was a mistake in their systems. You know how complicated these things can be. I'll check with my accountant and get it sorted out on Monday." But I heard something in her voice that I recognized instantly. It was the same tone she used at 16 when she came home an hour after curfew with elaborate excuses about the bus being late. Sarah was lying. And for the first time in my life, I began to wonder what kind of person my daughter had really become. When I got home that afternoon, I found an envelope under my door. Inside was a typed note: "Mr. Charles, if you want to know the truth about where your money is going, meet me at Café Luna tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Sit at the corner table. Come alone." It wasn't signed. My first reaction was to throw it away. It sounded like something out of a bad movie. But as I heated up a can of soup for dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about the note. Someone knew something about my money. Money I didn't even know I was supposed to be getting. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than resignation. I felt curious. And a kind of cold anger I hadn't felt since Linda died. If my own daughter was cheating me, I was going to find out the truth. Even if that truth destroyed the only family I had left. The next day, I arrived at Café Luna 15 minutes before 2 in the afternoon. I chose a table with a view of the entrance, my heart beating faster than I cared to admit. At 67, I wasn't used to mysterious meetings or anonymous notes. My life had always been predictable: work, home, bills, sleep, repeat. But now, sitting in that small cozy cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: the adrenaline rush of discovery. At 2 o'clock sharp, a woman in her 40s approached my table. She was well dressed but not ostentatious, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. "Mr. Charles?" she asked quietly. "I'm Rebecca Chen, executive assistant at Harrison Tech Solutions." My blood ran cold. Harrison Tech Solutions was Sarah's company. "May I sit down?" she asked, already pulling out a chair. "I have a lot to tell you." Rebecca ordered just a black coffee and got straight to the point. "Mr. Charles, I've been working for your daughter for 4 years. I manage her schedule, her personal finances, and many aspects of her private life. And I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." She opened a discreet folder and took out some documents. "For the past 2 years, Sarah has instructed me to transfer $2,500 a month to an account she said was hers. But I recently discovered that this account is not in your name, Mr. Charles. I felt the world spin around me. $2,500 a month? For 24 months. That's $60,000 that should have gone to you. $60,000. I could barely process that number. Where did that money go? I managed to ask. Rebecca hesitated. To a joint account Sarah has with Marcus. They've been using that money to fund their lifestyle. Travel, expensive restaurants, renovations to their house. She slid a sheet of paper across the table. These are the bank statements I was able to access. Every transfer is documented here. I stared at the numbers on the page, feeling a mixture of betrayal and anger rise in my chest. Every month, Sarah had embezzled money she told me she was sending me, money that could have completely changed my quality of life. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Rebecca sighed deeply. Because I can't live with this lie anymore. And because I found out something worse. She pulled another document from the folder. The lake house Sarah mentioned? It exists. She actually bought a $250,000 property in Lake Morrison 2 years ago. My heart raced. So she didn't lie about that? She lied about who it was transferred to. The property is in her and Marcus's name. It was never in his name, Mr. Charles. And they're renting that house for $3,000 a month to a retired couple. The revelation hit me like a runaway train. Sarah hadn't just stolen the money that was supposed to be mine. She had used my name and my situation to justify extravagant spending and lucrative investments. There's more, Rebecca continued, her voice growing quieter. Sarah has been using your financial situation as a kind of sob story for investors. She tells potential partners about how she's taking care of her widowed, needy father, how she's a devoted daughter who has made personal sacrifices to ensure his well-being. I felt nausea rising in my throat. She uses that to get sympathy in negotiations? I asked, already knowing the answer. Yes. Sarah secured a $500,000 business loan last year, in part because she convinced the bank that she was a person of exceptional character, citing her care for you as evidence. Rebecca pulled out more papers. And there are recorded meetings where she mentions the rising costs of your medical care as justification for salary increases and bonuses. The humiliation burned more than the anger. My daughter had turned my suffering into a bargaining chip, my financial hardship into a tool of manipulation. Why are you risking your job to tell me this? I asked again. Rebecca looked out the window for a moment before answering. Because my father died last year. He was a janitor like you, worked his whole life without ever asking anyone for anything. When I see Sarah talking about you like you're a burden, like you're a marketing piece, her voice faltered. I can't keep quiet. She slid one last piece of paper across the table. This is the account number where your money is really going. And this is the address of the house on the lake that should be yours. I took the papers with trembling hands. For the first time in years, I had information. I had proof. I had the truth. What should I do with this? I asked. That's up to you, Mr. Charles. But if he were my father, I would want him to know that he deserves much better. Rebecca stood up to leave, but paused and turned back. Oh, Mr. Charles? Sarah has scheduled a meeting with me for tomorrow. She wants me to prepare retroactive documents that prove the transfers to her account. She's planning to fabricate false evidence to support the lie. After Rebecca left, I sat alone in the cafe for over an hour, staring at the documents that changed everything. My daughter wasn't just a liar. She was a systematic fraud who had turned my paternal love and trust into tools for her personal enrichment. But for the first time since Linda died, I felt something other than resignation and sadness. I felt determination. Sarah thought her elderly father was easy to fool, a man too simple to question his successful daughter. She had bet on my loyalty, my gratitude, my desperate need to believe I still had a family. She had miscalculated. That afternoon, I drove to the library and spent 3 hours researching financial fraud, legal documentation, and the rights of victims of financial crimes. That evening, when Sarah called to check on me, I kept my voice neutral. Hi, Dad. How was your day? Are you still worried about that mess with the house? Actually, Sarah, I'm starting to understand the situation better. Great. I knew you'd realize it was just a misunderstanding. Sometimes these administrative things can be confusing. That's true, I said calmly. Things aren't always what they seem. After hanging up, I sat down in my worn armchair and looked at the documents scattered on the coffee table. Sarah had underestimated two fundamental things about her father. First, after 15 years of working as a janitor in corporate buildings, I had learned a lot about how business works, especially when I observed meetings through open doors during my night rounds. Second, a man who had worked with his hands his entire life, who had built a family with perseverance and honesty, does not give up easily when he discovers he has been betrayed. Sarah had declared war on my dignity, my confidence, and my future. Now it was my turn to play. And unlike her, I wouldn't have to lie to win. On Monday morning, I woke up feeling more energized than I had in years. For the first time since Linda died, I had a purpose that went beyond simply surviving the next day. Rebecca had given me more than information, she had given me power. At 7 in the morning, I called my supervisor at CityClean and used 2 of my 3 remaining sick days. For the first time in 15 years, I wouldn't be cleaning corporate offices in the city. Today, I would be the one doing the investigating. My first stop was the county recorder's office. If Sarah really owned property on Lake Morrison, there would be detailed public records. The clerk, a friendly lady named Helen, helped me navigate the property search system. I found it, she said, turning the monitor so I could see. A property purchased 2 years ago by Sarah Michelle Harrison and Marcus David Thompson. Purchase price, $250,000. My stomach churned. Here was the definitive proof. My daughter had used my name to justify the purchase of an expensive home, but never intended to transfer it to me. Can I print this information? I asked. Of course, sir. These are public records. While I waited for the printouts, Helen continued searching the system. Interesting, she muttered. Looks like they're renting this property. There's a vacation rental license registered here. $3,000 a month. $3,000 a month. Not only had Sarah stolen money that was supposed to be mine, she was profiting off a property purchased with embezzled funds. My next stop was the bank where Rebecca said Sarah kept the joint account. Obviously, they wouldn't give me any information about her account, but I could at least confirm the institution's existence. That's where I met Jerome, a manager who worked in commercial lending. Harrison Tech Solutions, he said when I mentioned the name. Sure, I know that account well. Your daughter took out a significant loan with us last year. A very touching story about caring for her elderly father. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my voice neutral. Really? Yes, she submitted detailed documentation about her family responsibilities. Very impressive for someone so young to take on that kind of financial commitment. Jerome didn't know he was talking to the supposed beneficiary of this responsibility. To him, I was just an elderly man asking casual questions. What kind of documentation did she provide? I asked. Well, I can't go into specific details, but it was proof of monthly transfers, medical documents, that sort of thing. It showed a consistent pattern of family care. Medical documents. Sarah had forged documents about my health to get a loan. I left the bank feeling a mixture of anger and determination. Each new discovery not only confirmed the extent of Sarah's crimes, but also gave me more ammunition for when the time came to confront her. Back at the library, I spent 3 hours researching bank fraud, document forgery, and identity theft. I learned that the penalties for these crimes could include heavy fines and years in prison. More importantly, I discovered that victims of family financial fraud had specific legal rights and that properly documenting the crimes was crucial to any future legal action. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Sarah. Hi, Dad. How's your day going? I hope you're not worrying too much about that mess with the house. Her voice sounded forced and cheerful, but I detected an underlying tension. Actually, Sarah, I'm starting to get a better handle on the whole situation. That's great. I knew you'd realize it was just an administrative misunderstanding. In fact, I've scheduled a meeting with my assistant today to review all the documentation. I'll make sure everything is properly clarified. Rebecca had warned me about this meeting. Sarah was literally planning to fabricate false evidence while she was talking to me. That would be very helpful, I said calmly. I look forward to seeing all the documents. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a moment, processing my daughter's utter audacity. She wasn't just maintaining her lies, she was doubling down, fabricating evidence to support years of fraud. If you've been following this journey of disturbing discoveries as I have, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next completely changed the game. That afternoon, I decided to visit Lake Morrison in person. If Sarah was renting my supposed home, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The property was even more beautiful than I had imagined. An elegant cottage with panoramic views of the lake, manicured gardens, and a private dock. There was a car in the driveway and movement in the windows. The tenants were home. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A man in his 50s answered, followed by a woman of the same age. "Hello," I said, trying to sound casual. "My name is Charles. I'm the father of Sarah Harrison, the owner of this house. I was in the area and thought I'd take a look at the property." The man's face lit up. "Of course. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Robert, and this is my wife Janet. Sarah has told us so much about you." They invited me in, and as we walked through what was supposed to be my house, Robert enthusiastically told me how much they loved the place. "Sarah is a wonderful owner," Janet said. "Very attentive and professional. She mentioned that this property has special meaning for the family." "Special meaning?" I asked. "Yes, she said she bought it specifically with you in mind, as a peaceful retreat." "How romantic, right? Such a devoted daughter." Robert nodded. "She explained that you prefer city life, but that it was important to have this place available when you wanted to escape the hustle and bustle." Each word was like a punch in the stomach. Sarah had created an elaborate narrative for the tenants, painting herself as the devoted daughter who had bought a retreat property for her elderly father. "The $3,000 a month we pay barely covers the upkeep of a place like this," Janet continued. "Sarah said she doesn't care about the profit because it's important to keep the property in perfect condition for when you want to use it." I spent an hour in the house, listening to Robert and Janet praise my daughter, while my heart broke a little more with every word. When I finally left, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, simply trying to process the magnitude of what Sarah had created. She hadn't just stolen money and forged documents. She had built an entire alternate reality where she was the perfect daughter taking care of her beloved father, using that fiction to manipulate tenants, banks, and probably many other people. That night, I methodically organized all the documents Rebecca had given me, along with the new information I had gathered during the day. I had proof of the embezzled transfers, property records, evidence of forged medical documents, and now witnesses who could confirm how Sarah had used my image for her schemes. But more important than the evidence was the clarity I had finally achieved about who my daughter really was. Sarah wasn't a daughter who had drifted away because she was busy with her success. She was a calculating criminal who had turned my paternal love into a tool for profit. The next morning, I made the decision that would change everything. It was time for Sarah to find out that her elderly, trusting father wasn't as helpless as she thought. And when that discovery came, it would be too late for her to turn back. On Wednesday morning, I called Sarah. "Hi, Dad. How are you? I hope you're not worried about that mess with the house anymore. Actually, Sarah, I'd like to talk to you in person today. How about we meet for lunch?" There was an almost imperceptible pause. "Sure, Dad. Where would you like to go?" "How about the restaurant at Lake Morrison? I hear it has a beautiful view." The silence on the other end of the line lasted longer than it should have. "Morrison Lake. Dad, that place is kind of expensive and far away. Why don't we just have lunch in town?" "Don't worry about the money, Sarah. Today is my treat." We met at 12:30 at the restaurant that was only 5 minutes away from the property that was supposed to be mine. Sarah arrived 15 minutes late, looking nervous in a way I had never seen before. "Dad, are you okay? You seem different today." I smiled calmly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. In fact, I'm feeling more clear-headed than I have in years." We ordered our food and made small talk for a few minutes. Sarah seemed to relax gradually, assuming she had misinterpreted my choice of location. That's when I pulled out the folder I had prepared. "Sarah, do you remember the conversation we had on Thanksgiving about the house you gave me?" Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Dad, I already explained that it was just an administrative mix-up." "You're right. It was a mix-up." I opened the folder and took out the first document. This is the deed to the property on Lake Morrison. Purchased by Sarah Michelle Harrison and Marcus David Thompson 2 years ago. The color drained from her face. Dad, I can explain. This one, I continued, placing another piece of paper on the table, is the rental record for the property. $3,000 a month to Robert and Janet, a very nice retired couple who told me fascinating stories about their devoted daughter who bought a retirement home for her elderly father. Sarah was opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water. And this, I said, my voice remaining perfectly calm, is the bank statement for the account where the $60,000 you said you were sending me over the last 2 years went. Tears began to form in her eyes. Dad, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It isn't? Then explain what this means. I placed a copy of the loan application she had filled out on the table, including the forged medical documents about my health. You forged medical reports saying I had early dementia and serious heart problems, so you could borrow $500,000 from the bank. Sarah was crying openly now, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. And this, I said, pulling the last document out of the folder, is the most interesting of all. It was an official letter from the Internal Revenue Service. You claimed all of these expenses as medical expenses for me, obtaining substantial tax deductions. Technically, that's federal tax fraud. Sarah turned white as a sheet. How did you get all this? Your assistant Rebecca has a father who died last year. He was a janitor, like me. She didn't like finding out how you used the image of her poor, sick father to get rich. Sarah tried to stand up, but I gently motioned for her to sit back down. I'm not finished, honey. Do you want to hear the really interesting part? She looked at me with a mixture of terror and despair. This morning, Rebecca handed all of this evidence over to the FBI. Bank fraud, document forgery, tax evasion. These are federal crimes, Sarah. Serious crimes. Dad, please, she begged. We can work this out as a family. I'll pay it all back. I'll pay every penny. With what money? Rebecca also showed me your company's financial statements. You're up to your neck in debt. The lake house is mortgaged, your credit cards are maxed out, and you owe your employees 3 months' wages. Sarah began to sob uncontrollably. The problem, Sarah, isn't just the money you stole. It's what you stole from me for 2 years. You let me believe that I was a burden to you, that my own daughter had abandoned me. I leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. You made me feel useless, forgotten, worthless. All the while, you used my name and my suffering to build your reputation as a devoted daughter. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Get caught. At that moment, 3 men in suits approached our table. Sarah Harrison? One of them asked, showing her his badge. Agent Morrison, FBI. You're under arrest. Sarah looked at me with utter despair as they read her rights. How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter. I stood up slowly, picking up my briefcase. A real daughter doesn't turn her father into a money-making tool, Sarah. A real daughter doesn't lie about taking care of her father while stealing from him. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed, Dad, please. Don't let them take me. I'll change. But I was already walking toward the exit. 20 minutes later, I was standing at the entrance to the property that would finally be transferred to my name once the legal proceedings were complete. Robert opened the door, surprised to see me again. Charles. It's so good to see you again. Robert, I said calmly, I need to tell you something about Sarah. 6 months after the day I saw my daughter taken away in handcuffs from the restaurant on Lake Morrison, I received a phone call that would change my life once again. Mr. Charles? This is Federal Prosecutor James Patterson. I have good news about the Harrison versus United States case. Sarah had pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid a public trial that would have completely destroyed any chance of rebuilding her life. Bank fraud, document forgery, federal tax evasion, each crime carried its own severe penalties. She received 24 months in federal prison, 5 years of probation, and mandatory community service. More importantly for you, all restitution was approved by the court. All restitution meant not only the original $60,000 that had been embezzled, but also compound interest, punitive damages, attorney's fees, and a complete transfer of ownership of the lake to my name. The total amount came to $143,000. There's something else, Mr. Charles, the prosecutor continued. The investigation revealed that your daughter was operating a similar scheme with other elderly relatives. We've identified at least 4 additional victims. Your courage in coming forward has saved many people from years of financial abuse. Discovering that Sarah had systematically exploited other vulnerable seniors was simultaneously shocking and validating. My decision to seek justice hadn't been just about getting my own money back, it had been about stopping her from continuing to prey on people like me. The following week, Robert and Janet came to see me when they heard about the official change of ownership of the lake house. "Charles, we know this must be extremely strange for you," Janet said, clearly nervous. "We want you to know that we never suspected anything illegal. Sarah always seemed so genuinely concerned about your well-being." "You did absolutely nothing wrong," I replied calmly. "In fact, I'd like to propose something that could benefit all of us." I offered them a new long-term lease at $1,500 a month, exactly half what they had been paying Sarah. In exchange, they would be responsible for basic maintenance of the property and would take care of the gardens they had grown to love. "Why would you do something so generous?" Robert asked, genuinely surprised. "Because Sarah used my situation to justify excessive profits and manipulate honest people like you. I'd rather have happy tenants who treat the property as if it were their own home." 3 months later, I made a decision that surprised even Rebecca. I officially moved to Lake Morrison. Not to the main house that Robert and Janet were renting, but to a comfortable guest house I had built on the same property, with a direct view of the lake. Robert and Janet stayed in the main house, and we developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared stories about gardening and fishing. For the first time in decades, I had neighbors who became my chosen family. The most significant change, however, was in myself as a person. For the first time in years, I woke up without that constant anxiety about money that had dominated every decision since Linda's death. I could buy my blood pressure medication without calculating the impact on the rest of the month's budget. I could eat nutritious, complete meals without rationing every ingredient or skipping meals to save money. More important than my newfound financial security was the restoration of my personal dignity and self-esteem. For 2 long years, I had carried the devastating emotional weight of believing that I was an unwanted burden to my only daughter, a failed father who couldn't adequately provide for himself in his old age. Discovering that Sarah had been systematically stealing from me while using my supposed weakness as a tool for social manipulation had been devastating at first. But it had also been deeply liberating. I finally understood that the problem had never been my inadequacy as a father or my inability to prosper financially after retirement. The problem had been blindly trusting someone who had learned to turn unconditional family love into calculated personal gain. Rebecca came to visit me in the fall, bringing a bottle of wine and news about her new position as the financial director of a non-profit organization that fights elder fraud. "Your story inspired me to completely change careers," she told me as we walked along the quiet lakefront. "I couldn't work in environments where I knew this kind of exploitation was happening anymore." "How do you feel about all this now?" she asked, gesturing toward the property that was finally legitimately mine. "Reconciled," I replied after thinking carefully about the word. "Not happy about Sarah's destruction, but completely reconciled with the truth." "Can you forgive her?" It was a question that had tormented me through months of therapy and sleepless nights. "Forgiveness is an extremely complex word," I finally said. "I don't feel active anger towards Sarah, I feel a deep sadness for what she chose to become. But forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring legal consequences or pretending that real harm wasn't done to multiple people." Sarah had written to me from federal prison in the 3rd month of her sentence. The letter was long, full of elaborate apologies and dramatic promises of complete change. She explained in detail about imaginary financial pressures, about the social necessity of keeping up appearances, about how everything had gradually spiraled out of control without her intending it to. I responded with a single, carefully considered page. "Sarah, I accept your apology as a necessary first step, but nice words don't undo 2 years of systematic lies and multiple federal crimes. When you get out of prison, you will have the opportunity to demonstrate genuine change through consistent, honest actions over many years. Until then, I will focus on rebuilding trust in myself and in the people who have proven themselves worthy of that trust through behavior of integrity." The following winter, Marcus desperately tried to reach me. He had permanently lost his license to practice law due to his direct involvement in Sarah's fraudulent schemes and was facing criminal charges of his own. "Charles, please, could you lend me a few thousand until I get back on my feet?" he pleaded on the phone. I was always respectful to you during the marriage. Marcus, I replied politely but firmly. True respect would have included alerting me immediately about the serious crimes you knew Sarah was committing against me. I sincerely wish you the best of luck in finding a completely honest way to support yourself going forward. Today, exactly 2 years after that transformative Thanksgiving day that changed everything, I wake up every morning to a breathtaking view of the lake that is finally rightfully mine. The profound irony is not lost on me. Sarah tried to use my image as an abandoned and needy father to build a fabricated reputation as an exceptionally devoted daughter, but her elaborate lies ended up providing me with exactly the comfortable life she pretended to be offering her. I have real financial security, a truly beautiful home, genuine friends in Robert and Janet, and the inner peace that comes from knowing my own worth regardless of other people's validation or approval. Most importantly, I have learned a fundamental lesson. True strength does not lie in passively accepting whatever treatment we receive from our family, but in having the moral courage to confront the painful truth when it finally reveals itself, regardless of the social consequences. The last I heard from Sarah, she had landed a basic office job at a small accounting firm after getting out of federal prison. Minimum wage, extremely simple life, paying restitution every month for the next 8 years. I feel no vindictive satisfaction at her current situation. I feel a cautious hope that she is finally being forced to learn the fundamental value of honest work and genuine humility. As for me, last week, I received an unexpected call from the County Department of Social Services asking if I would consider giving regular lectures to senior citizen groups on how to recognize and prevent sophisticated family fraud. Your story could protect and save many vulnerable people, Mr. Charles. You have a unique perspective on warning signs that most professionals never develop. I jumped at the opportunity. Over the past 6 months, I've spoken to more than 200 people at community centers, libraries, and support groups. Each presentation reinforces something I've learned through this terrible experience. We are stronger than we imagine, more resilient than we believe, and more capable of recovery than we ever suspected. If you've come this far on this journey of discovery, betrayal, and ultimate recovery, I sincerely ask that you subscribe to the channel to follow other stories of people who have turned devastating betrayal into personal triumph. Every story we share is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and completely rewrite the ending of your own story. Because in the end, Sarah didn't just fail miserably at destroying me, she unwittingly gave me the unique opportunity to discover a stronger, wiser, and more determined version of myself. And that transformed version will never again allow love to be naively confused with manipulation, or familiar trust to be quietly converted into exploited vulnerability. Sometimes the most painful betrayals reveal themselves to be the most valuable gifts, carefully disguised by time and perspective. My daughter tried to steal so much more from me than money. She tried to steal my self-esteem, my confidence, my dignity, and my future. But in the end, all she did was teach me exactly how strong I've always been.